Welcome to From Center Ice. My name is Courtney, and this isn't my usual background. For those of you that have been around, don't worry, I will go back to Blackhawks and Ice Hogs videos. I do still have a season recap coming up, and I have some more things planned, but now is playoff time, and I really miss talking about the playoffs. So, I am officially throwing my support behind Leafs Nation. Now, you may ask, Courtney, the Tampa Bay Lightning don't look like they've lost a step at all, and the Colorado Avalanche look like an absolute powerhouse team. Why are you talking about the Maple Leafs? Because I like pain. I mean, I cannot go from talking about the 2021 Chicago Blackhawks and Rockford Ice Hogs to talking about two ridiculously stacked teams in the Tampa Bay Lightning or the Colorado Avalanche. That just doesn't make any sense now, does it? Jokes aside, and stick with me here, Leafs fans, the Maple Leafs are my second team, and they have been for quite a few years now. No, really, if you go to the From Center Ice Twitter page, the Leafs are in the bio, and it's been like that since we created the Twitter account. But without once again going into how exhausting this whole season has been, I haven't paid enough attention to the North Division because I was so focused on the Central and what the Blackhawks were doing and what the Ice Hogs were doing. So I didn't talk about the Leafs a whole lot this year, so if you haven't been around for longer than just this season, you probably wouldn't know that. I've referenced it a few times on the podcast, but if you only watch the videos and don't listen to the podcast, then you wouldn't catch that. So for anybody new to this channel, especially Maple Leafs fans, since I will be talking about the Leafs in these videos, hello! My name is Courtney, like I said right at the top. I reside in the land of Connor Carrick, aka Illinois. You know, Blackhawks fan, just kind of makes sense, right? So how the heck did I become a Maple Leafs fan? Well, you see, there's this guy named Dave Bolland. Yep, that's the one. Blackhawks fans, Toronto Maple Leafs fans, you all know the name. And Bruins fans, if any of you are out there, you know the name too, eh? Mr. 17 Seconds himself. Now do you forgive me for the jokes at the beginning, Leafs fans? I'm on your side, I promise. So after the 2013 playoffs and the whole 17 seconds thing against the Boston Bruins, Dave Bolland was shipped off to the Toronto Maple Leafs, and I was not ready to let go. Dave Bolland was somewhat of a legend here in Chicago, the Rat, if you will, and he had just won us the friggin' Stanley Cup. So he was shipped off, and I said, I'm going to watch him wherever he goes. That ended up stopping with the Maple Leafs. I didn't watch him once he went to the Panthers, but you know, details. Anywho, I had followed them somewhat in the 2013 season. You know, there were some exciting players on that team, and James Reimer, yes, that angel goaltender. So then when I really started paying attention to them in the 2013-2014 season, something about the Toronto Maple Leafs team just kind of grabbed my soul and clung on, and it hasn't let go. At one time, I was fans of two very different teams, being the Chicago Blackhawks and the Toronto Maple Leafs. They were on two very different ends of the spectrum, and they kind of are once again, but this time it's flipped. It's okay, I guess I can sacrifice some Chicago success so the Maple Leafs can hopefully have some. Anyway, while I can't say that I know what a lot of you are feeling who have been fans of this team for a very long time, I have witnessed some of the very bad of the Toronto Maple Leafs teams. I thought Jonathan Bernier was going to be a savior for the franchise. I loved Jonas Enroth. I thought that they really needed to sign him, and then once they did, I was like, oh my gosh, this was an amazing signing. It wasn't. And then Jonathan Toews absolutely broke Frederik Andersen. Anaheim was willing to part ways. They made a deal with Toronto. Andersen went to the Leafs. And I am very sorry, Leafs fans. You can go ahead and blame all these years on our captain here in Chicago, but I, like many others, thought that Freddie might have been the goaltender to be able to get this done in Toronto. They've had some strong teams, mostly strong up front. The blue line's always been a little iffy, but they've made moves. And then they finally had a good, solid starting goaltender in net. It should have propelled them past the first round, at least. And it has not. I don't need to tell you that. So, you will be very happy to know that I have no predictions about Jack Campbell. My only opinion of him is that he seems like the absolute sweetest human on the earth and must be protected at all costs. I somehow managed to curse all of the other Maple Leafs goaltenders, so I just don't predict what this one or any other future ones will do. And I'm usually pretty good at reading goaltenders. I don't know what went wrong. I guess it's just Toronto. It's a curse. I also do not predict series, and I don't go into any of them wanting a particular opponent because in 2014, I said, wow, The LA Kings are probably pretty tired going into the conference final. I would really like the Blackhawks to face off against them because they would have a good chance of winning. They didn't. So after that, I have never said, oh, I want my team to play this team. So to recap, no goaltender predictions, no series predictions, no hoping for an opponent should the Maple Leafs happen to get out of the first round. All that said, here is what I will do. Starting in the fall playoffs last year now, I began making videos before each Blackhawks game posing 3 questions for the next game. And then after the game, I would make 3 questions for the next game, but I would also go over the 3 questions from the previous game to talk about how that game went down. I continued that into this season. I did most of the games. There were a few that I missed, but I will continue that for the Toronto Maple Leafs in the playoffs. So before each game, you will get 3 questions for the next game, and then we will answer those questions and talk about how the previous game went. Makes a lot more sense once we just get into it. You don't even have to do anything. You can leave comments if you want. I love to read them. I respond to all of them. And just go click on one of the past videos for the Hawks or the Ice Hogs if you want to see how it goes. So my 3 questions for game 1 will be at the end of this video, but before we get to those, let's go over this matchup. First round matchup, the Toronto Maple Leafs versus the Montreal Canadiens, and to kick that off, let's talk about the Toronto Maple Leafs team because that is who we are all here to support. Sorry if there's any Montreal fans watching this, I will talk about your team, but I am not rooting for them, so I don't know why you are watching this, but hey, if you are also welcome to leave comments, that's fine. Everybody is welcome here, we are just here for funsies. So the 2020-2021, that is very hard to say, Toronto Maple Leafs finished first in the North Division. Through 56 games, they had a record of 35, 14, and 7, and that equals 77 points. Their home and away records were strangely pretty even. I don't know if that has to do with no fans being in the arena or what, but I was surprised to see that. At home at the Scotiabank Arena, they went 18, 7, and 3. When they were outside of Toronto, they had a record of 17, 7, and 4. Shall we talk about special teams? I'm very sorry, I know, but we have to get to it at some point. So the power play. They finished with a power play percentage of 20%, which was good for 16th in the league. And like I said at the beginning, I haven't paid a whole lot of attention to the North Division this year. Usually in a normal season, I will watch as many games as possible, especially Maple Leafs games. If there's not a Blackhawks game on, or if I am not at an Ice Hogs game, I will be watching the Leafs game that night. And I always flip on NHL Network at night while I'm editing or doing whatever, and I watch all the highlights. This year, I watched a few games. I watched more in the beginning of the season, so I haven't quite seen how horrendous the power play has been, but I do follow a lot of Toronto media on Twitter and whatnot, and it hasn't been good lately. If I'm recalling correctly, they were at the top of the league on the power play, right up there with Chicago. I think they were 1 and 2 at one point. So much like my Blackhawks, who could not fail on the power play at the beginning of the year, both teams just kind of drove it off a cliff and could no longer convert on any power play. Makes a lot more sense for the Blackhawks. For the Maple Leafs, with all of the talent and firepower, I don't know what's going wrong, so if any Leafs fans want to clue me in on that in the comments for how they were not scoring on the power play, I would love to know. And then there's the penalty kill, which ended 24th in the league. They killed 78.5 of their penalties this year, which I guess isn't terrible, but it's not good, clearly, because, 24th in the league. So, I don't know, the special teams numbers aren't very confidence-inducing, but once I talk about the series coming up, you'll see that it's actually not super terrible, strangely. But let's talk about this roster. We all know that they have massive firepower up front. I mean, you have freaking Auston Matthews, the top goal scorer in the league this year. But the knock on the Maple Leafs has always been that they're just kind of soft and they don't have good defense. There's always been a question mark in goal. Well, not always, but these last few years of Frederik Andersen's tenure in Toronto, there's been a big question mark in goal. So Kyle Dubas made some additions to this roster. And when I say additions, I mean additions. You've got Jumbo Joe Thornton. You've got Wayne Train Simmonds. TJ Brody, fantastic signing. And Zach Bogosian. He is injured. He was in a regular jersey in practice today, I want to say. And by all accounts, he's been pretty solid throughout the season. And then two of their bigger gets at the trade deadline were Nick Foligno and Dave Riddick. Riddick? I hear both ways. So the Leafs filled a lot of holes. Will that be enough? I guess we will have to see. But let's look at some stats, shall we? Stats are fun. So here are the top 5 scoring forwards for the Maple Leafs this season. At number 1, we have got Mitchell Marner. Through 55 games, he put up 20 goals and 47 assists for 67 points, because of course, why would the Maple Leafs top point getter, when they have a very good roster for the playoffs, not finish with 67 points? Like, you just have to laugh at this point, right? In slot number 2, we have Auston Matthews. Through 52 games played, he scored 41 goals and added 25 assists for 66 points. In the third slot, we have Captain John Tavares. He played all 56 games for the Maple Leafs this year. He scored 19 goals and added 31 assists. That would give him 50 points. Number 4, William Nylander. How many people still think he's overpaid? That was such a weird narrative from the beginning. In 51 games, he put up 17 goals and 25 assists for 42 points. Number 5, Zach Hyman. In 43 games played, he scored 15 goals and added 18 assists for 33 points. And my goodness, this guy is a player that any team would like to have on their roster. And it was such a nothing trade when Toronto got him, too. It's so weird how things like that work out sometimes. But he just works and works and works every single shift. He is very fun to watch. I have 3 more honorable mentions. The first one is Jason Spezza. He was 6th in scoring on the team, so he was the next up. Through 54 games, he put up 10 goals and 20 assists for 30 points. We all still don't forgive Mike Babcock for not putting him on the opening night roster, right? I mean, and for many other things. Next, Joe Thornton. This guy just keeps going, and he's a great addition to the locker room. Aside from just adding some solid names in the offseason and at the trade deadline, Kyle Dubas really went for that leadership role, which I don't think is necessarily a knock on the guys who are already in the locker room, but it is still a pretty young team and a team that hasn't won. Sure, you got Jake Muzzin with a ring. And while Thornton and the rest don't have rings themselves, how can you not look at his career and be like, he is a great leader. We need him in our locker room. I think anybody would agree with that. And you always gotta have the old guy that you want to play for, and who doesn't want Jumbo to win the cup? Just hopefully he doesn't score 4 goals a game in the process. If you know, you know. Anyway, through 44 games, he put up 5 goals and 15 assists for 20 points. And then I had to add in trade deadline acquisition on here in Nick Foligno. In 7 games played with the Leafs, he's added 4 assists, so 4 points. He's one of those players where you really start talking about the quote-unquote intangibles, but he can get you some really greasy goals when it really matters. And I would not be shocked to see him pot some very important goals in the playoffs. So those are the forwards. Let's look at the top 4 point getters on defense for the Maple Leafs. Number 1, Morgan Rielly. Surprise, surprise. In 55 games, he scored 5 goals and 30 assists for 35 points. Now, that was a little shocking to me. That seemed kind of low for Rielly, but I could be totally making that up, so let me know what you think in the comments. Number 2, Jake Muzzin. In 53 games, he scored 4 goals and added 23 assists for 27 points. In the number 3 slot, you have Justin Holl, who was originally a draft pick of the Blackhawks, and then they just kind of let him waste away in the ECHL. So good on you, Toronto. It's nice to see him develop into actually a useful player. In 55 games, he scored 2 goals, and he added 18 assists for 20 points. Last on the list is TJ Brodie, and through 56 games played all games for the Maple Leafs this year. He scored 1 goal and added 13 assists for 14 points. So those are your point leaders for the 2020-2021 Toronto Maple Leafs in the regular season. I'm sure they'll probably be in about the same order once the playoffs are done, whenever that may be. But you never know, there's always kind of some surprise player for each team in the playoffs. Maybe Ilya Mikheyev will just bust out and start scoring a bunch of goals. That'd be fun. So on May 16th, Chris Johnston tweeted out the lines in practice for the Leafs. I don't know if that's how they will remain for game 1 of the playoffs. That's why I added the date. This was tweeted on May 16th, but here's how they went. A first line of Hyman, Matthews, and Marner. On the second line, you have William Nylander, Tavares, and Foligno. A third line of Kerfoot, Riley Nash, and Ilya Mikheyev. That is going to be the scoring line of the playoffs. That would be very sad. Unless they just busted out for like 20 goals in one round. That would be a good story, but you need the top guys producing too. And you have a fourth line of Joe Thornton, Jason Spezza, and Wayne Simmonds. Just all of those names on one line is just... On defense, first pairing of Morgan Rielly and TJ Brody. Second pairing of Jake Muzzin and Justin Hall. Third pairing of Rasmus Sandin and Travis Dermott. Jack Campbell is the confirmed starting goaltender going into game 1. Anderson was backing him up in practice. They also have Dave Riddick waiting in the wings and Michael Hutchinson down with the Marlies, who just beat the Laval Rocket yesterday, and Carey Price and Brendan Gallagher were playing. They were on a conditioning stint, but that's just very weird. So that is the Leafs. Let's look forward to this series against the Montreal Canadiens. The Canadiens finished 4th in the North Division this year. They had a record of 24, 21, and 11. And here's what I mean about Toronto's special teams numbers being very interesting. So Montreal finished 17th in the league on the power play. They had a percentage of 19.2%. Now let's rewind a little bit. Toronto finished 16th in the league with a 20% power play. So the Leafs were just one above the Canadiens in the standings. On the penalty kill, the Montreal Canadiens finished with a percentage of 78.5. Now, rewinding a bit, the Toronto Maple Leafs finished with a percentage of 78.5. Yep, they tied. So while the numbers didn't look great for Toronto, if you just read the stat line and don't look at anybody else, in their first round matchup, the Montreal Canadiens finished basically the same on special teams. And I don't know what kind of curse was put on the Maple Leafs power play, but you have to think at some point they will start converting on it. Hopefully that's in the first round. That would be very helpful. But if not the first, maybe the second, should they progress, or the third, and that is where I will stop because I don't want to start going too much and put too much hope out into the universe. The universe just has a way of crushing hopes. But special teams weren't the only numbers where these two teams were pretty similar. Shots per game. Toronto ended up with 31.3 shots per game. Montreal, 31.2 shots against per game. Toronto ended with 27.8. Montreal, 28.2. I mean, it's hard to get much closer than those two numbers without being exactly the same. And for a team that finished first in the division and a team who finished 4th in the division, having these numbers very similar was interesting to me looking at them. But then you look at the scoring and that's kind of where it pulls away. So goals for per game. Toronto ended with 3.32. Montreal, 2.82. So while it's still kind of close, there's not going to be a whole lot of differential throughout the whole league unless you're like Buffalo, but that's enough of a difference to put Toronto on top in the regular season in that category. Goals against per game. Toronto ended with 2.64 and Montreal ended with 2.95. So again, still pretty close, but Toronto still has the advantage. Of course, on paper, Toronto has Jack Campbell and Frederik Andersen. On paper, Montreal Canadiens have Carey Price and Jake Allen. I haven't read if there's a confirmed starter for game 1 yet. Price was injured. He did play that game for Laval yesterday, but I also wouldn't be surprised to have Jake Allen in there. But I don't know how the Canadiens don't start Carey Price game 1 and just see how it goes. So if I was a betting person, I would say Carey Price is in for game 1. But who knows? So just taking a look at Montreal's roster, I'm going to run real quick through their top 10 point leaders. Number 1 is Tyler Toffoli. Oh, Vancouver. He had 28 goals and 16 assists for 44 points. Number 2 is defenseman Jeff Petrie. 12 goals and 30 assists for 42 points. Number 3 is Nick Suzuki. 15 goals, 26 assists for 41 points. He has as many points as Auston Matthews had goals this year. So there's that. Number 4, Thomas Tatar. 10 goals, 20 assists, 30 points. Number 5, Josh Anderson. What a trade. 17 goals, 7 assists for 24 points. I think Columbus is regretting that one a little bit. Number 6, another former Blackhawk, Philip Deneau. 5 goals and 19 assists for 24 points. Number 7, Brendan Gallagher, who again was injured. He did play for Laval last night, so I'm assuming he's in the lineup for game 1. 14 goals, 9 assists for 23 points. points, but that was only in 35 games. Number 8 is Jonathan Drouin, and looking at their cap-friendly page, it appears that he is on LTIR, but he had 2 goals and 21 assists for 23 points. Number 9, Corey Perry, 9 goals and 12 assists, 21 points. They need to just stay away from him. You really want to get out of this series with no injuries, and he has kind of a habit of throwing some elbows around. I really don't like him from all of his years in Anaheim. Anyway, moving on. And finishing up with number 10, you have Jesperi Kotkaniemi, 5 goals and 15 assists for 20 points. But then, most importantly, you have Montreal's goaltenders. And I say most importantly because of the names that they have, but also because Toronto's game is so much scoring. So the goaltenders for the opponent are kind of important. Okay, very important. First up, we've got Jake Allen. He played 29 games for the Canadiens this year and had a record of 11, 12, and 5. He had a 2.68 goals against average and a .907 save percentage. And then there's Carey Price. 25 games played. He's got a record of 12, 7, and 5. A goals against average of 2.64 and a save percentage of .901. So the stats aren't very flattering for Montreal's goaltenders, but the playoffs are a whole new season. Oh, and let's not forget that at the trade deadline, they added Eric Stahl, they added Eric Gustafsson, another former Blackhawk, thankfully. And then there's Cole Caulfield, and in 10 games with the Habs, he's already put up 4 goals. So there's a guy to look out for. So before we get to the 3 questions, that brings me to the Toronto Maple Leafs goaltenders. Let's start with Freddie. He's been here the longest. He played 24 games for the Maple Leafs this year, and he also played for the Marlies, much like Carey Price played for Laval because, you know, injuries and such. He has a record of 13, 8, and 3 with a save percentage of .895 and a goals against average of .296. So, game 1 starter, Jack Campbell. He played 22 games for the Toronto Maple Leafs this season. He has a record of 17, 3, and 2. Even better, a .921 save percentage and a 2.15 goals against average. Jack Campbell has had a fantastic regular season for the Leafs. You'll love to see it. Again, he seems like the sweetest person in the world. I'm very happy for him. I hope that he does well in the playoffs, but once again, no predictions. So, if both teams have to end up using both goaltenders for whatever reason, do the goalie stats kind of average out? Campbell has the best numbers out of the 4. Freddie has the worst. But the 2 in Montreal are kind of even-ish, but they also aren't that great. We will just have to see. Again, playoffs are a brand new season. Anything can happen. You know that as well as I know that. So enough talking about these teams. Here's my 3 questions for game number 1. Question 1. Can the Leafs get settled in early and dictate the pace? So, Maple Leafs play a fairly fast game, and they are very skilled, very offensive. Montreal has a few guys that can really get under your skin. Thankfully, they don't have Max Domi anymore, but they do have Brendan Gallagher, and they have Corey Perry. So it would be very beneficial to this Maple Leafs roster if they could start game number 1 and start game number 1 strong and really dictate the pace of this game. Show Montreal they aren't afraid of them. They're going to score anyway, and just keep going at the goaltenders, no matter who they may be for the Canadiens. Question 2. Can they get on the board first? 2 reasons for this. 1. Lots of talk in Toronto about the playoff goaltending in the past forever. Number 2. The Montreal goaltenders are Jake Allen and Carey Price. One of them being Jake Allen, the other one being an injured Carey Price. You can't let them get settled in. You can't let them have a good game. Don't do what Colorado did against St. Louis in game number 1. Jordan Binnington had a very strong 40 minutes. Thankfully, Colorado came back in the 3rd period. They were able to pepper him with some shots and some goals and won the game. But if the Maple Leafs don't get that strong lead at first, maybe the recent playoff history and the goaltenders, especially if it's Carey Price, get into their heads and really screw with their game. That's not saying that if Montreal scores first, the Leafs will lose, but it would be a lot better for this team and for the morale if they score first. It would be even better if they score on the power play, which leads me to question 3. Will the power play get back on track? The question kind of speaks for itself. The Maple Leafs need to be scoring on the power play. There is no reason for them not to be scoring on the power play. Playoffs, game 1, brand new season, start over. Start scoring on the power play. And maybe work on the penalty kill to get those numbers up a little bit too. So those are my 3 questions. This video's kind of been a marathon, but it's a preview for the game. We went over a lot of numbers, a lot of players. Oh, and I don't normally sound like this. I've had a lot of sinus issues the past week, stupid allergies. So all we can look forward to is Thursday night, game number 1, Maple Leafs versus Canadiens. It's what everybody wants to see, right? Do you have any questions for this game, for this series, for this team? Let me know. Leave them in the comments. I would love to read them. Also, who do you think scores the first goal of the series for the Leafs? Let me know that one too. I'm gonna say Ilya Mikheyev because I talked about him earlier and the playoffs are weird. If you would like to hear more from me or from Center Ice, if you are new and a Leafs fan, I mean, you can explore. There's a lot of Blackhawks and Ice Hogs things if you're interested. But in the playoffs, there will be Maple Leafs, there will be videos, there will be some articles. So you can head on over to FromCenterIce.com and check out the links to everywhere you can find us. If you are more of a social media person, you can follow us on all of the platforms. The links to all of those are in the description down below. I do live tweet the games over on the Twitter page. Obviously, live tweeting Twitter. It's been a long season, okay? Words are not always the easiest. But all of that being said, thank you so much for watching. If you're a Hawks fan, I don't know, just stick with me through all this. It'll be fun. We can talk about the playoffs. There have been some great games so far. If you have thoughts on any of the other playoff games, you can also leave those in the comments. I would love to read those as well. If you are a Leafs fan or a Habs fan, if you wandered over here, welcome to the channel. Let's have some fun, and I will catch you all after game number 1. Bye, guys.
Thank you all for watching. Please hit that subscribe button to catch more From Center Ice content. If you could, hit the like button on this video, maybe share it with a friend or two. And while you're here, check out the podcast playlist and catch up on some old episodes. We will catch y'all next time. Bye!